everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. We have a show for anyone who wants to learn how to manage your manager, and that's not easy to do. And we have Bruce Tulgan, who has written this beautiful book, It's Okay to Manage Your Boss, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different scenarios that you may be finding challenging with your boss and how to tackle them. So welcome, Bruce.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back.
So and it's great to actually have you back. That was a fun show. Um, so I have a couple questions. So your book, it seemed like this was written more for a young person. Is that right? Or is this for any age
I mean,
person?
look, it's probably the case that anybody of any age with a job and a boss, would do
Right.
well to learn some of the basics of managing your boss. But it is meant to be for younger, less experienced people. You know, we've been tracking generational change in the workplace now for 23 years.
Hmm.
And so we're constantly interviewing the youngest people coming into the workplace, the second wave millennials, and we're always looking at the working relationships they have with their immediate leaders, managers, and supervisors. And one of the things that we've learned is that the young people who seem to be doing best, the self-starting high performers, a big part of what they're doing is taking a pretty active approach in taking responsibility for their relationship with their manager. They're going to their managers and getting what they need
Hmm.
in order to get set up for success.
Yep.
And so what I took that research and said, oh well, you know what the most successful young people are doing, uh, and put it into a form, and I call it managing your boss. So the book is It's Okay to Manage Your Boss.
So have you found that it's changed over time? Because I know you started looking at Gen X. Has the management's story or picture changed over time? Is it? I'm guessing that probably managers are more pressed for time, less educated about, probably less educated or trained on being managers and putting those positions way earlier. I don't know. Tell me what's changed over time.
Yeah, well, I would say two things. From the manager's standpoint, look, it's always been hard to manage people,
Right.
but it's getting harder and harder and harder. And more leaders that we work with, and we train managers all over the world, and more managers tell us uh, that the workplace is more and more high pressure, and the workforce is more and more high maintenance.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's getting harder to manage people. Most managers, they're pressed for time. They have too many people to manage. Some of the people they manage work in remote locations. Some of the people they manage work a different schedule. Some of the people they manage do tasks and responsibilities and projects they've never done before. And meanwhile, managers are busy doing their own work, and budgets are tight, and their boss is telling them, hey, just go tell everybody to work longer, harder, smarter, faster, and better.
Right.
But we're cutting your budget, right? So you know, so 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 managers are getting squeezed, and then meanwhile, their employees, especially the younger, less experienced people, but people of all ages, are pushing back a little. And the manager says we need to do more, better, faster, and the employee says, "Oh yeah, well I don't want to work on Thursdays.
Right.
I can't work on Thursdays. And can I bring my dog to work?"
Right.
And you know, and of course, that's again, people of all ages are trying to take care of themselves and their families. People of all ages want more flexibility. People of all ages are getting squeezed. But the youngest, least experienced people, the millennials, they're coming into the workplace in this new environment. They've never known it any other way.
Right.
And so they want flexibility. They expect flexibility. They are not trying to wrap their life around a career. They're trying to find a career they can wrap around the kind of life they want to have.
Right. So that's so different. The fundamental understanding, never spoken but understood in my generation when I started many, many, many years ago, was that you're basically slave labor. You have to work many, many hours so that the partners or whomever don't have to work as many hours, and that was like all okay. And now that's like you said, all have to be happy, right? It's not that I am going to, as a young person, be sacrificed anymore, and that's hugely different. Um,
But there is a reason for that, and that's because that short-term sacrifice, pay your dues, climb the ladder, work double time, triple time. The whole idea was because in the long run, the system will take care of you.
right, and that's
And
no
and
longer the promise.
right. So
Oh,
what's changed is that nobody trusts the system to take care of them in the long term anymore, least of all the youngest, least experienced people. And so if you don't trust the system to take care of you in the long term, you start looking to your immediate boss to take care of you in the short term.
Right.
Everything is short term and transactional. So, what this means for managers is, it's always been hard to manage, but it's much harder to manage now. And what it means for the new young workforce is that, as you say, young people used to come in, keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, do as you're told, figure it out, bend over backwards and jump through hoops. You're going to be here a lot. And in the long run, the system will take care of you. Well, now young people walk in the door and, they say, hey, listen, I don't think I can work on Thursdays.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Well, that actually provides more context because in the book that you have, it's okay to manage your boss. You have things like, okay, it's important to. I get it now. So what you're saying is, and my son is a millennial, so he really is symbolic of this. He operates on the 80-20 rule. Tell me what you want. Tell me exactly what you expect, what good looks like, and show me a little bit of details, and then I'm off and running. But if you expect me to run around and try to figure things out on my own, and that's wholly inefficient. Why would you work that way? Is probably what he
Right.
would say to me, and that's very much what you propose in the book, right? It's being frequent meetings, and you say in the very beginning, maybe even daily meetings, which I thought, oh my gosh, if I had an employee that wanted to meet with me daily, how would I
Right.
manage that? So is that working though? Because you said, how does that work? Every 15
Well,
minutes,
well,
15 minutes every day?
Well, look, that is an extreme case, but sometimes you have to do that because the circumstances on the ground are changing that frequently. So, what ends up happening otherwise is managers kind of breeze by and touch base. Hey, how's everything going? Everything on track? Any problems I should know about? Hey, let me know if you need me. And then what happens is throughout the day, you're interrupting each other because something pops into their head, something
Right.
pops into your head. So, you interrupt each other all day long. Meanwhile, you're sort of trying to keep track of each other on email. You might find yourself in some meetings together. And so you say, oh, well, we don't need to meet. We're already doing that. But that way of spending your management time, that way of communicating, doesn't create clear expectations. It doesn't set people up for success. And what usually happens is problems hide below the radar. And then all of a sudden the building's on fire, and then it's, oh, we all got to jump in and put out the
Right.
fire. We're all in firefighting mode. So see, that takes a lot of time.
Right.
And the way I look at it is, it's sort of like, if you want to be in shape, you take a walk every day.
Right.
Well, then you're going to live long,
Right.
right? Uh, so you get that time back, you
Right.
know, and so the idea is you're investing. You know, you take a walk every day, but gee, on the other end, you're going to save a lot of time when you're not in the hospital with that heart attack.
Right.
And
Right. It's like short term little bursts of, I don't know on average based on your research how many employees one person manages, but at least in my own experience, you can have between 3, 5, and 8 employees that are reporting to you, depending on the organizational
right,
structure.
right,
And now there are these agile teams where you have like people
right.
floating in and out of these. So that would be, say, worst case, 8 people, 15 minutes a day. A good portion of your day would be
Oh
meeting with
yeah,
people.
but it would be crazy to meet with every person every day,
Right.
right? What you need to do is figure out what is the right cadence of conversations with each person. Lots of people, it might be once a week. Some people, it might be every other week. But there are people, if you're a leader, if you're a manager, there are people you may have written off as hopeless low performers that if you met with them for 15 minutes a day, you'd find out, oh, that person's not a loser. That person just needs a lot more guidance.
See,
You
to
know,
me, like I think both my husband and I'm like, if someone had needed to meet with me 15 minutes every day, I just wouldn't even hire them because they just
right,
too
right,
high
right.
maintenance.
So that's exactly it. So you could make a business decision and say, yeah, that's too much.
Right.
And so that means you can't do the job. But with a lot of people, if you did that for a couple weeks, then in week 3 you could meet every other day. And by week 5, maybe you're meeting once a week. And so you get somebody on board, you get them up to speed, you give them structure, and then you step back. Some people maybe you meet twice a week, some people every other week.
Right. So you
You
can
know,
actually take a person who you think is a non-performer and actually make them into a pretty decent performer just by meeting with them more frequently, is what I'm
or
hearing.
at the That's absolutely right. Or at the very least, if you meet with them more frequently and you find out, wow, that person's still a low performer,
Right.
then okay, then I can feel good about getting that person off the team
Right.
because
Okay.
I've just really invested in trying to help that person, and it's still not working. Okay, well, I've given you a fair shot. I tried to help you. Now we're gonna have to move on. And but look, so this is all from the manager's perspective.
Right. Yeah. But from the
But
employee's perspective.
yeah, because the reality is, and I wrote a book called "It's Okay to Be the Boss"
Right.
from the manager's perspective.
Right.
From the employee's perspective, the reality is most managers do not do this.
Right.
Most managers do not provide regular, structured guidance,
Right.
direction,
Right.
support,
Right.
and coaching. So most employees are not getting a regular uh, 15 minutes a day, or every other day, or once a week where they can go over expectations, troubleshoot, go through my list, your list in a structured way.
Right.
So what my advice to employees is, hey, your manager's probably not doing this. So you want to be a self-starting high performer who's super organized, who's great at managing yourself and makes your boss feel like he or she doesn't even need to manage you.
Yeah.
What you need to do is take charge of this dialogue. So you go to your boss and say, hey, let's meet once a week, or maybe it's twice a week. Go in with your list. Make sure you understand exactly what's expected of you, and show your boss. You're giving your boss regular updates. So this is the kind of person that the manager thinks, wow, this person doesn't even need a manager. The
Right.
reality is, yes, he or she does need a manager. It's just that this employee is doing a lot of your work,
Right.
manager.
Okay, so let's say that I'm an employee. I would say, hey, it really. So tell me what the conversation would look like. So let's say that you're the employee and I'm your boss. What would you say to me to initiate these whole ideas of this meeting?
Well, I guess, your best bet is to go to the boss and say, gee, I'm really into the job. I'm committed. I really want to succeed. And so I really want to make sure I know exactly what's expected of me every step of the way. And I want to know what it looks like to go the extra mile
Hmm.
because that's what I want to do. So, what I'd like to do is make sure that I know what the broad performance standards are. And then I want to know every step of the way, what are your priorities? A lot of days, there's more I'm supposed to do than I can get done. Gosh, that's an important business decision. So I want to help. I want to ask for your help in setting priorities. I want to come to you and say, okay, here's my plan, and get you to tell me, yeah, good plan. I want to make sure that we're clear every step of the way because I think if I do that, I'm going to have fewer unnecessary problems. When there are problems, we're going to get them solved more quickly. I'm going to make better use of resources because we're going to plan them. I'm going to make sure I'm following standard operating procedures. And I think you'll be able to delegate more responsibility to me. So, but I really want your guidance and direction. I want to be a star here, and I want your help.
Okay,
And so
so I'm gonna
I,
pretend I'm gonna pretend I'm like a jerk boss, okay,
okay.
or a normal boss. I don't even know. So what is it that you're asking? What's precisely do you want from me then?
Well, for starters, what I would like is if I could get time on your schedule, uh, I would say every week, but maybe we could try just the first meeting, and I'll come in really prepared and show you what I have in mind. I want to brief you on the work I'm doing, tell you what my plans are for the rest of the week, and make sure that we're in alignment and see if there's any troubleshooting or guidance or direction or support that you want to make sure I have, and make sure we're on the same page and I'm headed in the right direction. And if the meeting goes well, then I'm hoping we could make it a regular thing.
And how regular would you like it? You said once a
Well,
week, but is that how often?
I I know that you're very busy, and
Hmm.
so my goal is to make very good use of your time. So I will use as little of your time as I can get away with, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure after every single meeting you walk away thinking, wow, it's a good time we had that. It's a good thing we had that conversation. It's a good
Okay.
thing we had that conversation. And my commitment to you is, if you're not feeling that way, you're the boss. You tell me.
Okay.
But I'd like a chance to show you that I will make good use of your time. I will be respectful of your time. Maybe we could start with one 30-minute meeting, and then maybe after that conversation, you're the boss. Maybe you can decide when the next time would be for us to talk.
Okay, perfect. All right, God, that was actually really great. Like, if some person came up to me and asked that, I'd be like, okay, like, why would you say no to that? Honestly, that was a perfect way of describing it. Okay, so
Well, I even wrote a book about it.
I know. All right, so uh, it's uh, it's 30 minutes are coming. You know, you've sold me. I put something on our calendar. What does the first meeting look like?
Well,
Let's do the hypothetical. Like, let's think of something that you and I may have done before, like a market research. We're about to conduct some new market research, and I said to you, Bruce, go ahead and conduct research on the millennials, and we need to have that research done by, I don't know, a month from now. Okay.
well, okay. So I will take your scenario, but first, let me just say that one of the things about these conversations is, they take on their own life. So you're very right to focus on the early conversations
Yeah.
because those will be the ones where we're not in the habit yet. Those are the ones where we're trying to create this dialogue, and um, and as an employee, if you want to prove this to your manager, you want to own it. See, the first thing you do is prepare. Now, my advice is to go in and say, um, you know, don't assume your boss knows everything you're doing,
Hmm.
right? So my advice would be to try to have a big picture conversation
Hmm.
after once you get on the schedule. Have
Okay.
a big picture conversation
Okay.
and come in and say, I want to brief you high level overview on here are the projects, here are my tasks and responsibilities. Here's my understanding. Here are my understanding of your priorities, big picture, and here's where I am right now. Here's what I'm focused on this week.
Okay.
So that would be my way in,
Okay.
and then what you want to do is um, come out of that conversation with a kind of at least a preliminary understanding, even if it's not a formal understanding of ground rules going forward. So you, your best bet is to always have deliverables. So
Hmm.
if it's a market research project, that one of the things you would do is say, okay, so one of the things I'm focused on right now is this market research project.
Hmm.
I made a plan, but I also made a one-page bullet point outline of my plan so you can eyeball it and just tell me if I'm on the right track. I want to make sure before I'm about to go put in 40 hours of time on this.
Right.
This is my plan, and so if you want me to make revisions on the plan, let me go do that real fast, and so I know I'm pointed
Okay, so
in
the plan,
the
let's say
direction.
that the market research report would be like, we have to actually figure out the set of questions. There's all these milestones. So market research would be like, get it clear with what our report is going to be, come up with the people that we're going to survey, what are their demographics, go and ask the questions, do tabulate the results, come up with and let's say that those are the high level milestones. What would you get? What would the plan look like for a market research? Is that kind of what it would be like? Is that
It,
enough?
it could, sure, it could be, but then my advice to anyone who's trying to create more clarity is drill down. So that might be the bullet points at the first
Mm-hmm.
page. But what you really want is for the boss to think, oh, and when people have done this before, they've made this mistake. So let me flip to that part of the plan and
Ah,
see,
okay, got it. Okay.
right? So, or, really? Wouldn't have expected that in your plan. Let me flip to that and see what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So that what you want to do is with a project, the tool of clarity for a project is a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan is, right, for each, you call them milestones, I would call them intermediate goals,
Okay.
right? For each of those intermediate goals, the next level is the smaller goals. And then for each small goal, there might be a list of concrete actions.
Mm-hmm.
And the further down, you could get to step by step instructions for each of those actions and a time budget for each step. So
Right.
that would be the most precise you could get.
Right.
And that would be your a tool of great clarity. Now,
Ah, okay.
right. So some managers might say, and by the way, I see you know how to do this. So
Mm-hmm.
next time, you don't need to give me quite such a detailed plan.
Right. Okay.
But the good news is if you give your boss that detailed a plan, you are demonstrating mastery. And you're telling your boss, this is the level of autonomy and responsibility I can handle. I'm showing you this is the level of detail on which I understand it.
I
Now,
see.
then the next time you do this, you give them the bullet points. You might have a plan. Maybe it's not quite in as much detail. But again, you're going to have given your boss some very important information about your level of mastery of this project. And you can do the same thing with a recurring task or responsibility. The tool of clarity with a recurring task and responsibility is standard operating procedures. And the next level of that would be a checklist for each standard operating procedure.
Right.
And,
Right.
and again, you do that, you give it to your boss, and your boss says, oh, I see you really understand how to do this.
Right.
Um,
I
or
see.
if the boss is smart and really reviews it and says, oh, I'm glad you gave me this because that's not how we do this.
Right, right. So
It's
it's just to
very
clarify.
important.
So one was an example of a project I just gave and what you're saying is enumerate the high level bullet points of the plan. And then another may be a recurring task like every month I do an inventory audit where I actually look and see and count that we actually have the current whatever, the right inventory in the back of the house. And so
Exactly.
it's like every week I'm going to and then you provide a checklist. The first thing I'm going to do is verify, figure out what our inventory records have on hand. The second thing I'm going to do is actually go count the things and see. The third is I'm going to notice discrepancy and register in this book. And the fourth is I'm going to do that. And, who knows, but you'd give them a checklist. And then they could say, no, you don't have to do any of that. Just do a teep, teep, and it's all scanned, who knows what it
Exactly.
is.
Right.
So I
I
see.
mean, often the manager will say, wow, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because that's not how we do it.
Right.
And sometimes it's, wow, this looks like a great way to do it. And here's the other thing that if you create this ongoing dialogue with your manager, now, if you're a manager, you should take responsibility for this. But if you're not being managed this way, if you create this kind of ongoing dialogue with your manager, then you can also use the project plan, use the checklists um, on an ongoing basis for yourself to document what you're doing so you can track your performance yourself, keep score, uh, take note of when you finish different milestones, take note of how long things take you, keep work product, keep those checklists. And then what happens is if your boss comes to you and says, hey, I want to check up on something, and you say, oh, yeah, well, I keep detailed contemporaneous notes about everything I do. Here's the checklist from today. And
Right.
the boss goes, wow, you really keep track. See, what this does is you're doing a lot of the work of managing yourself. You're
Right.
helping your boss manage you.
Right.
And when you help your boss manage you, it tells your boss that you have a high level of responsibility and commitment, that you are all over the details. It tells your boss that you can handle more responsibility. Maybe you should be promoted to be a manager. And right. And it allows managers to responsibly delegate responsibility to you and to have confidence in you because what you're showing your manager every step of the way is, hey, if you were looking over my shoulder, managing me like crazy, you might be doing all this stuff. I do that for myself,
Right.
right?
Right.
So you don't need to do that.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's how you make your manager feel like you are a self-starting high performer who doesn't need a boss.
Right.
The shortcut is a lot of hard work,
Right.
but people don't succeed without doing a lot of hard work. This is how you become the star by helping your boss manage you so that you end up managing yourself.
Right. And so what I'm hearing is like, so in the case of a project, it would be enumerating or recurring, like what are the clear goals? I'm just reading stuff from your book. Tell me
Yeah,
if I'm missing something. So you said, what are the clear goals? What are their detailed parameters? So like in the case of the
yeah,
inventory, it's like, no, you have to use this particular computer system. We want you to, what you want to do afterwards is go talk to Rose afterwards. You don't have to do that.
right.
She'll enter it. So those are kind of the detailed parameters, accurate deadlines. So in that case, like I'm assuming that this report has to be done this time, a month from now, like you said, CJ, but then there are probably some interim things, and I'm thinking about pacing it out this way. Does this seem right based on your own experience with? So that's what it looks,
Exactly.
what accurate deadlines looks like.
And even like, hey, I think this is going to take me 6 hours, and you either say, wow, okay, that's about right, or wow, that's really fast, or wow, that should take 6 minutes. Why would
Right.
it take you 6 hours? Right.
Interesting. That's a real. I would never have thought of asking that, but I think it's really good to say like I'm thinking it's going to take 6 hours, and the person could go, "Wow." All right. So that's the accurate deadlines, and also how long you think it's going to take to deliver, and then within each milestone, like let's say in the market research report example that I gave, the first step was to identify the goals of the market research report. So then what I'm hearing you say is the next meeting would be like, let's say that you and I met, and at this point, I don't know who's the boss in this scenario, but the boss said, yes, this is a good plan. Once the boss says, yes, this is a good plan, then I'm going to tear off and work on step one, which is to come up with the goals.
Right.
And then what I heard you say is as an employee, I'm actually delineating those goals. Like if in order to create clear goals, you want to actually make sure you talk to the stakeholders and understand what their needs are. You need to, whatever the steps are
Right.
to create a clear goal would be your delineating that, and the meeting with your boss and saying, here's my sense about the next, the first step. I'm assuming these are the minor steps. Am I missing anything? I'm thinking this is going to take a week. Are there any people that I should talk to? I'm hearing like resources. There's like who should I talk to get this information?
Right. Right.
Um, and then providing drafts or samples of your work, and then explaining what good looks like. Like, what is the gold standard? I think is what you said in the book. So,
Right.
how would you ask your boss if it's like? Would you give me a sample of something that you think is well written, or what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, you could say, is there a similar work product so that I can see what's been done before? In some cases, that's not true. Do you know of something like this? Or sometimes it's you know it when you see it. So, okay, I'll run it by you and you can keep tweaking it. But the more you're in dialogue, the
Yeah.
more you're gonna have clear expectations. You're gonna be set up for success. And, when you're having this kind of conversation, then managers really know I need to speak with you every day, or I could speak to you once a week. Hey, for you, it's probably better if we talk for an hour every other week. And not only that, but what happens is then the manager can, let's say there's a reason this person is your manager, that
Right.
this person does have more experience,
Right.
right?
Right.
And does have something to offer you. But it also allows the manager to bring the coaching and teaching to you at your level. So
Mm-hmm.
once the manager realizes how good you are, the manager says, oh, but I see you have this blind spot, or here's a place where you do need more guidance, this is the thing you always forget, or
Mm,
here's where you have a development need where you could really grow and build your skill set.
right.
So it's a chance for you as an employee to shine, but it's also a chance for you to optimize your manager's guidance
Mm-hmm.
also, and to help your manager uh, provide the kind of guidance that you need, rather than telling everybody the same thing over and over again. It
Right,
allows
they
them
can
to kind of
customize. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so
yeah.
then the other idea on what good looks like that I know I've done from a knowledge transfer group is ask them to take your best. So, like, who's best at doing inventory? Who's like your gold standard person of doing inventory or doing market research? Or like, oh,
Right.
just talk to Joe over there. He's great. And then you'd sit down with him. So I think that that's another what good looks like. Um, and then the other thing that you ask is make sure you have information, training, money, space, skills, workarounds, tools, and resources, which I think you were just mentioned. So Like, where am I going to do this work? Because it may not be clear. Where's the workspace? What are the supplies I need? What are the materials? Where do I get them? What's the equipment? What's the transportation that's involved? Information, maintenance, people, talent, training, communication, cooperation. Who should I talk to? So it's getting, because oftentimes we run around not knowing that there are other people around that can help us.
Right. Right.
So how would you
Yeah.
ask that? Because this is a long list of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't necessarily need to ask all those things all the time.
Right.
But the my point of emphasis is this, that, you know, one of the things you need if you're an employee is you need to have the resources to do the job.
Right.
And often people feel like they're being asked to do a job without the necessary resources. So sometimes it's that they don't know where to get the resources. And the
Mm-hmm.
boss really, one role for a manager is, hey, to make sure you have the resources you need.
Mm-hmm.
But right, but there's another piece of it. Like sometimes it's, oh, get it from Mr. Blue.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the manager needs to say, and by the way, here's how to go about getting it from Mr. Blue,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
Let me give you some advice, because sometimes Mr. Blue doesn't answer his call or whatever, right? Okay. So
Right.
that's one thing. But the other thing is, I think it's very important also to be able to have a conversation about, hey, what if we don't have the resources?
Mm-hmm.
Because very often in the real world, you have to do things without optimal resources.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's really good is to have guidance from a leader to say, okay, if you don't have the resources you need, here's one way you might work around that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, here's what I think you should do. Or here's plan B or plan C,
Right.
right? And it's important for the manager to know that the employee might not have the resources. Oh,
Mm.
I didn't realize that.
Right.
And what you don't want is, as a manager, to come back at the end of the day and say, "Is it done?" And the person says, "Oh no, this morning I went to do it, but the stuff wasn't there, so
Right.
I didn't do
Exactly.
it." No, no, no. We need to anticipate that might happen.
Right.
And let's talk through, what do you do if you don't get those resources? See, these are all of the ways in which investing in this conversation, it seems like a big time commitment, but there's a big return on investment every step of the way.
And here's the sad thing. I've had numerous examples of people I've coached who are like, yeah, I've told my boss I'm under resourced and we're underfunded. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to have to do the best that we can. That's always the answer over and over again. So, what would you say as an employee in that case?
Well, let me then make a couple of plans for how I could possibly do this without these resources.
Mm-hmm.
And then at least you can tell me if that's acceptable. Because,
Right.
hey, if I don't have tape, I'm going to have to use paper clips.
Right.
Right? If I don't have
Right.
paper, I'm going to have to write on a napkin.
Right.
So is that okay? Or would you rather I write on the table?
Right.
Or would you rather I,
Right. Something's going to
write on
get
my
some.
arm and
Yeah.
take a picture of it? Do you
Right.
want me to just try to remember? You know,
Right.
tell me what you want me to do without the resources.
That would be a hilarious conversation. Okay, but I love that because I had, when I was coaching this gal, it was about like a under resourced project, and they had a client and they underestimated. They told the client it was going to cost X, and it was costing like 1.5 times X, and they wanted to make sure it was X, and so they were saying. And I was like, well, you're going to just have to ask them to cut features. They have to cut something off of the list. Like, they can't expect you to do all this. So, that was, but I liked also the idea of like, okay, here's how we can do. We can do that, but here's what's going to go off of the list, or here's what we're going to
Yeah,
do. Quality is going to suffer something.
right.
Okay.
If there's a workaround, there's gonna be a cost.
Yeah. Um, all right. So I think I asked, okay. So I love some of the questions that you asked. Like, so if you're in the one-on-one, you had a set of questions that would help your boss. So every week going in and saying, so here's my game plan. What's shifted and changed? What adjustments and corrections do I need to make? Right? Because you never know. Because oftentimes there are, and your boss just thought to tell you about it. Like, oh yeah, we're having a reorg, so that's not even working anymore. You're like, well,
Right,
thank you.
exactly.
Thank you
Right,
very much. I'm
exactly.
glad I asked this question.
I
Um,
mean, how often does that happen? That I mean, it happens all the time to
all
people.
the time.
And they've
Yeah.
spent days on end on something, and it turned out, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, we actually, that's funny. I'm glad that you said because we cut that whole project. You're like, okay, thanks. I'm glad I'm not going to work on that anymore. Okay, so how do I need to change or adjust my resource plan? So that's what you're just saying. Like, hey, you know, I thought that this tape was going to be in here next week, but it's not. It's going to be 2 weeks out, and I can't do anything. We've talked about it. We can expedite it, but the tape's not going to get here for 2 weeks.
Right.
So what should we do? So how do I change my resource plan? How do I need to reprioritize my to-do list of concrete action. So you're constantly like, here's the things I'm working on. Tell me if you want me to change, but here's the priorities
Right.
I'm working on. Has a checklist to ensure quality control for every concrete action plan change. So that's another thing, which I thought these are a great set of questions. Like, has a checklist to ensure quality control for every concrete action change as a result of the shift in priorities, right? So things may have changed and you're still working off the same checklist that you
Right.
had, and it may no longer be valid anymore. Like, you don't have to talk to Mr. Blue because Mr. Blue was fired. You have to talk to
Exactly.
Mrs. Green or whatever it may be.
Yeah, actually, you're going to have to go up to the seventh floor and get it yourself
Yeah,
because we got rid of Mr. Blue, right?
exactly. Um, has a checklist okay, and what priority should it be focused on as of right now? Right, that's kind of similar to the other questions. So,
Yeah,
let's say,
and remember, then it's a dynamic conversation that evolves over time. So the hope is that you and your manager get into an upward spiral,
right.
uh, and that's the idea.
Right. Okay, so here's some scenarios that I'm wondering about because almost any boss that would love this is already a good boss. Probably. It's just you're helping them out be a good boss, frankly. But then there are bosses who are just not they can't meet you because they're constantly overbooked. Like I've literally seen people who I look at their calendar, they have 3 things booked at one time. I'm like, so you have 3 things booked at one time. What are you going to do? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'll figure it out. So you have people who are management positions like that. So they just don't have time. They're not organized. Even if you do try to meet with them, they're not going to be focused at the task at hand. What would you do given this process and a manager like that?
Well, I mean, look, the best thing for the organization and the best thing for the manager and for the rest of the team would be to, get that manager to see the light
Right.
and, put some structure into his or her time
Yeah.
and, create order and discipline and focus. But in the absence of that, as an individual employee, what you want to do is be the one who gets that structured time from the manager. And
But they're
you be
they're
the
so
one,
unorganized. They can't even meet with you because they have things
right? So
scheduled.
what so you're the one who is organized enough that you create some structure and you get some regular structured dialogue with that manager and it's not as good for the team or the organization or the manager, frankly. But what you do is you get what you need. So I've heard stories after so many stories from people we've interviewed. One person who says, well, I know that my manager always gets stuck in traffic, so I got him an early holiday present. I got him a headset and said, could I call you at 5:30 and go over this stuff with you?
Right.
And he said he always tries to call, and he gets them a couple times a week.
Right.
I had one young person told me that she realized that her manager came in very early to have quiet time. So she said, I just start coming in early. And then once he got the idea, then he started closing his door. And she said, but I saw, he had this great big tumbler of coffee. So I knew he was going to have to come out of there eventually. And she said, as soon as he came out, she'd start following him with a clipboard and ask him her questions. And
Those are
and she said,
hilarious stories. So you just have to
yeah,
be more organized. All right. So this brings up the second point where it seems like not everyone, I mean, you strike me as someone who's highly organized, disciplined, detailed, oriented, but not everyone is like that. So, and I'm actually the same way. So this would work out great for me, but having coach clients, not everyone is like this. I mean, it, by the time they listen to this interview, they may be like, I'm doomed. Like I can't even organize the interview because there's just like so many ideas that were floating in here. So what's the dumb down list? If you can't like, okay, this seems way too complicated to me. Now I'm scared. I'm doomed. What's a simple way to start?
Well, look, the first person you have to manage every day is yourself, and so everybody can benefit from getting better at self management.
Hmm.
But the thing I always tell people is just set aside an hour a day, just like if you were going to set aside an hour a day to take a walk every day.
Hmm.
Like you take a walk every day. You say, all right, I'm going to do that. What you're trying to do is create a habit.
Hmm.
And, people are creatures of habit.
Hmm.
Good habits feel right.
Hmm.
Bad
Hmm.
habits feel right. That's why they're habits, right? So, people are creatures of habit. And the choice you have to make is whether they're going to be good habits or bad habits. And, once you already are in a habit, it feels right. To build a new habit requires a period of discomfort. You have
Hmm.
to prove, you take a proven technique and practice it.
Hmm.
Practicing a proven technique for a few weeks, you will start to build a new habit. So I say set aside an hour every day
Hmm.
and use the first half of it to get yourself organized, and then use the second half of it. Just figure out who do I need to talk to. A lot of people have more than one boss,
Right.
right? Maybe there are coworkers. Maybe there are. Maybe you are managing some people.
Right.
You know, take a first half hour and get yourself organized. The second half hour and go have a one-on-one with either your boss or if you have multiple bosses, one of your bosses, or somebody who is in an interdependent role, and create clarity
Right.
so that you're
Right. So if your
setting
boss
everything
is
up
not
for success.
available, maybe if your boss is not available, find another mentor that would be available. And
Yeah,
also the
listen,
other thing,
if you've
yeah,
got one of those bosses who's never available, you might have to go manager shopping. Find
right,
yourself a better
yeah,
boss.
yeah. And then the other thing I'm thinking is email would be the other thing because a lot of managers they just like just send me an email. Do you think that works? Is that
Well,
I
I
know it's
think
not as
it's
ideal, but
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes it's the best you can do, but sometimes I think it's very important one-on-one, in-person conversation is good. Trying to have some kind of video conversations, having telephone conversations, but email is very, very useful. And so, if you're going to communicate by email, then then you want to develop the same kind of thing, a structured routine. So maybe what you do is send an email every day saying, here's what I'm focused on today, or send an email each week. The longer
mhm.
the email, the more you're going to have an executive summary at the top.
Right, right.
Um, but if you're going to communicate primarily by email or largely by email, as most people do, then your best bet is set yourself apart by creating a structure to the email dialogue.
Mhm, mhm,
So, it has a special subject line.
mhm.
And this is our ongoing dialogue that we're having by email.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to, for my manager, I'd have like weekly status and I'd have the goals on the top. Then I'd actually list the 5 things I was working on, the 5 things that I'd got done. And then I would have the list of questions that I had when I met with them one on one. So it was kind of all kind of organized so that, and it's like, and whatever else you need to ask me during our one on one. But this is kind of how, that's at least how I manage my
Yeah.
managers.
So
And they receive the same thing every time.
it's not an accident that that's what's in the book. It's because the book is based on interviewing the most successful people, and what the
Right.
most successful people do is they realize the people in positions of authority in relation to their work. They want to please them, and
Yeah.
so they take a very active role in making
Yeah,
sure
that's
that you know
exactly what
what's
I did. I
expected.
don't know how I managed to do that, but I did the similar type of thing. All right, we only have 5 more minutes, and I look at all the questions that I have. All right, so I want to
I'm
ask.
sorry, I give long answers.
No, 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 no. That's not it at all. Um, all right. So I want to ask a couple of questions, and I'd love to have you on because I have all these great questions that people ask me all the time. I'd love to get your thoughts on it, but um, I'm going to ask you the several bosses scenario because more and more often we actually have several bosses. We work on, we're a member of like 6 different teams, and we're working with 6 different bosses. which becomes a problem in review time, right? Because when you're reviewed and people are trying to, at least the traditional models, I don't know how it works now, but at least in the old model where I came from, they would have your manager would go in and go for, like go up to
Right.
bat for you. And then they'd literally, where I used to work at Microsoft, they would have a boat and they'd like throw people off the boat. They would literally have a forced curve, and then
Yeah.
your boss would have to advocate for you, and
Yeah.
the biggest problems occurred when you were working on a job where people were like an external facing job. So really no one knew exactly how well you were doing what you were doing. And you'd have to ask the partner for feedback. Or an instance where you had like four different projects that you were working on simultaneously, not with one boss. So how do you manage bosses in those kind of scenarios successfully? And how do you work it out so you don't get messed up during when it comes to bonuses and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, your best bet is any person you report to for any period of time on any project, any task, any responsibility, you need to have some kind of ongoing structured dialogue with that boss. It doesn't have to be every day. The reason you should set aside as an employee, you should set aside as a boss manager, somebody who's managing bosses, you set aside an hour a day because you need time for self management.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of that time is because you probably do have more than one boss, or maybe you have one official boss, but you have people you're reporting to on different
Right.
projects. So what you do is maintain this ongoing dialogue, and that's one of the reasons it's so important to keep track of your work, to monitor and measure and
Right.
document your own work, right?
Right.
So you're constantly those checklists, those project plans, those work products and your ongoing dialogue with each of those managers, uh, this is you keeping track,
Right.
you making sure that, and by the way, each of those managers is going to know a whole lot more who you are and what you're doing if
Right.
you're the one who's doing that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you start putting out detailed work plans, like this is going to take 6 hours, and that's going to take 6 hours, and that's going to take 6 hours, like, okay, like I don't have enough time to do this in a given week because all these
Right.
projects are taking 6 hours. And then if you do have that kind of that detailed of a plan, you can start knowing when you can pre-anticipate when problems occur. But oftentimes when you go to the manager and you're like, hey, I've got like I only work 40, 50 hours a week, and when I add up everything I'm supposed to do this week, I'm at like 80. So
Yeah.
what do you
Well,
want
that's
me to
why it's
do?
exactly, and that's why it's so important to keep score for yourself, keep track, and it's why it's so important to be in dialogue with multiple leaders so
Right.
that and they see, you when you're that person, I promise you, you're the one they don't want to lose.
Right. Oh, you're saying if you're that kind of person, because I would oftentimes, at least in my era, where people were kind of not so nice, they'd say, "Well, just get it done. I guess work 80 hours." Like, what do you want me to do? Would be the
Right.
answer. Are people different nowadays? Would that response engender a different answer?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I would say, look, there's always going to be leaders who have no sensitivity to people's personal needs and work-life balance needs. There's certainly much greater sensitivity to the idea of flexibility and work-life balance.
Right.
But in this environment, the person who is keeping score and getting clear expectations and getting lots of work done very well, very fast, all day long, day after day, and reporting routinely in detail to their managers, that's the person they don't want to lose.
Right.
And if they don't want to lose you, they might want to keep an eye on the fact that you're doing 80 hours a week.
I love it. All right, we've been talking to Bruce Tulgan, and we've been talking about his great book, It's Okay to Manage Your Boss, in which we've just like skimmed the surface of all the great ideas that he has in these books. And I thought that introduction of what you would say to your manager was fantastic because sometimes people just need a role model, like, what do I say? So that was fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Tell me your website if people want to go and find out more about you because you've written several books. Tell us your
Yeah,
website.
I've written a number of books, and thank you so much for having me on the show. We're at rainmakerthinking.com.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.